Um, yeah, it's pretty much what I've been doing related.
Well, that was perfect. You gentlemen gave me just enough time to get us live. So thank you. Thank you to everybody out there. Once again, the team comes through pretty great. Sorry, we're having issues because technology is technology. We are happy to have anybody associated with the Catholic Land Movement here with us tonight because all of us here on this program, and I'll speak for Joey too, even though, we won't tell him, but we believe in what the Catholic Land Movement is. It is the best, and I know Angel, the pleasure of speaking at a Catholic Land Movement event. I have had the pleasure of speaking at a Catholic Land Movement event, and I consider Michael Shannon a friend of mine. He did let me sleep in his cabin out in the back in New York somewhere. So, I mean, I guess we're that close, but, and it was an absolute, because I interviewed Michael a couple years back when I was doing Catholic radio for the Crusade Network. And I actually had the pleasure of hearing him speak at the St. Benedict Center probably 5 years ago as well. That's actually where I first met him. And to watch the Catholic Land Movement really germinate, and I'm going to use that word specifically, right? You see the pun there, germinate from an idea and some speeches into meeting the late Holy Father and actually getting, to introduce that idea to him it's just so great. And it really is just amazing to watch this movement grow and to watch people really get behind it because it is deservedly so. So we are just very happy to have you guys here from the Catholic Land Movement. We're going to focus on that tonight. Our primary focus is going to be the logistics of charity, prepping not just for yourself but for your neighbor, because there's always that question when it comes to prepping. Is prepping charitable? Is prepping a Catholic thing? For a multitude of reasons. Like I said, we're going to get into it more when we get into it. The actual topic, this idea, well, you got to trust in God, and what about sharing with your neighbor and all these other kinds of things. We're going to dive deep down into that, but we have a couple topics. Stefano can jump in on these or not, depending on how comfortable he is on these, but for the regular council tonight, we are going to talk about our first story up, which is the ice brigades continue to move in. And this week, the newest one was Charlotte. And I have a couple friends. No, not you. We'll talk about you in a second. We're going to talk about you. I have some very close friends out in Charlotte, in the Carolinas, and they're telling me that it really is nice. The traffic is very nice out in Charlotte right now, considering the amount of migrants or illegals that have been arrested because of the movement of the feds into this area. So just Trad and Angel will go. Trad, then Angel up on this. What do you guys then if Stefano, if you want to jump in after, thoughts on another? We have yet another city that is now struggling because, of course, it's a liberal run city, so it's going to be struggling with it. Now dealing with their migrant problem.
No, for sure, Rick. I mean, people don't think about there's certain states that come to mind when you think of border crossings, ICE raids, stuff like that. Mostly southern, California, Arizona, New Mexico, a little bit of lots of Texas, right? Charlotte doesn't come to my mind when I'm thinking, oh, that's where a lot of these immigrants are going to, right? But this kind of shows you that this is a national issue. This is a national domestic issue in the U.S., right? Illegal immigrants are quite literally everywhere in the country, and these sorts of raids are calling to mind, where these people are in our communities, where these people, if they're criminals, where they're hiding in our communities, and props to the ICE agents, props to the federal government on this one for doing their due diligence and upholding the law, right? Upholding immigration and customs law, because they're making these communities safer. They're getting these bad actors out of the country as quickly and as safely as they can. And I gotta say it. I think it's a good thing overall.
Yeah, Rick. I always say we're not against immigration. We're against illegal immigration, right? Like my parents immigrated from Cuba in the 70s, right? And I'm a first generation American. So I'm not necessarily against immigration. I just feel that it needs to be done right. I've been at the embassy in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, working in Army Civil Affairs, and I've seen the lines of people, you know, out the door, like camping out for days, just trying to get a visa or somehow some way an entry into this country. And the sad part is most of those people do overstay their visas because life is better here than a place that there's no job and no food, or the areas where they're living are overtaken by cartels or crime, and they are victims of either a system or of crime. Most of the time it's drug lords or crime in those countries, whether we talk about Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela. And we let the news contaminate us, but the reality is that most of these bad actors that are being arrested and deported are actually people with criminal records in those countries, their host countries where they originated from. And I'll say one more thing, I'll pass it on. I can be all day probably talking about this, but there's a documentary. National Geographic did a documentary, and during the Biden administration, how the border entry was basically wide open. They were using forklifts to allow people in the border, through into the United States with no unfettered access. And as they were coming in, they were nationals from all over the world, which this people don't know, and a lot don't even. The legacy media is not going to tell you these things. They're from all over the world, and you'll see piles of identifications that are being thrown out, so they can start from scratch in America with a new name, a new birth certificate. They're literally going to have a brand new identity, because in some of these countries where they come from, whether it's India, China, they can probably just be kind of start over, right? And be untracked. And that's the idea.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, guys, fantastic. Now, of course, I'm going to throw a grenade. I didn't tell anybody about this until right now because that's how I roll sometimes. But earlier this week or late last week, the USCCB came out, made a statement about immigration, which piqued a lot of heads because there were no statements about immigration during the Biden regime. There was very little statements about abortion, about same-sex marriage, about any of these other kinds of things. But this is the latest. The USCCB has been making statement after statement about immigration, so much so that we had to have the Holy Father come out and say something about it.
Bishops have made a very strong statement about the deportation and detention of migrants. What do you think of it? And they kind of said that you've got their back. Were you behind that?
Well, I've made some statements about that already. I appreciate very much what the bishops have. I think it's a very important statement. I would invite, especially all Catholics, but people of goodwill, to listen carefully to what they said. I think we have to look for ways of treating people humanely, treating people with the dignity that they have. If people are in the United States illegally, there are ways to treat that. There are courts. There's a system of justice. I think there are a lot of problems in the system. No one has said that the United States should have open borders. I think every country has a right to determine who and how and when people enter. But when people are living good lives, and many of them for 10, 15, 20 years, to treat them in a way that is disrespectful, to say the least, and there's been some violence, unfortunately, I think that the bishops have been very clear in what they said, and I think that I would just invite all people in the United States to listen to them. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen. Sorry about this. I'm throwing it at you. We'll go Angel, Joey, and then Stefano. If you once again, if you want to jump in on it, you have, nobody. If you don't want to say anything, totally fine by that.
Senator Mark Kelly.
What are you all doing? Stop it.
Yeah, Rick. I'm glad the Holy Father spoke about this. He is our leader in the faith, and in faith and morals. And even though what he said wasn't exactly dogma or something that he passed, like a dogmatic event or council, I think that these news conferences, whether it's on the airplane or when he's retiring for the night, when he usually speaks, I think that it speaks a lot. And I would probably listen to what the Pope says more than what any politician says. So it's good advice. Our wise leader spoke, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, likewise, I agree with that. And if you listen to what Pope Leo's statement is, I mean, he's very clear. He says, no one has said that the United States should have open borders. I think every country has a right to determine who and how and when people enter. A lot of people were critiquing the Pope several weeks ago, about statements he said off the cuff, but he's basically saying the Catholic position, right? The Catechism goes over the Catholic social teaching on immigration and just treatment of the migrant, of the asylum seeker, right? I think he's agreeing with the USCCB in the sense that, right, everybody deserves humane treatment, everybody has dignity before God, but at the same time, countries have laws, countries have borders, and as the authorities, within the state, they have the divine authority, right, to protect their citizens, to protect their borders, to make sure that their laws are upheld. So, I like what Pope Leo said there. He's exactly spot on. I didn't see any real issues with that statement. I mean, we could get into the prudential stuff of, okay, what does humane treatment look like, right? And what does that look like? But at the end of the day, he did say that countries have a right to protect their borders and determine who is allowed in and who and how to remove illegals. So no, I got to say, props to our Holy Father. I like what he said here.
Do you want to jump in on this, Stefano, or no?
I mean, the only thing I have to say in the light of being humane, I think it could be drawn either the wrong way or treated to such an extreme where you might want to turn the blind eye on either criminal or the other extreme, where in the cases that can happen where you have narratives created by any government, whether it's ours right now or otherwise, where you paint a bad picture of people that are not criminals. You have that mixture, right? And we just have to be very careful. Human beings remain being human beings, criminal or not. And we have to just navigate that carefully.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I agree with everybody here on the council tonight about that. Especially now that we're in the pontificate of Pope Leo the 14th, and Pope Francis, the Holy Father, previous would have taken that opportunity to be a little bit more flamboyant, I'll say, in his answer. You could see the measurement, and this is what I was trying to tell people about Pope Leo. I mean, he's left of center. Let's just understand that. That's not shocking to anybody. But his tone is more measured. It is less emotional when he answers these questions, and it is more in line. He's a canonical lawyer, so he's going to understand these things by what the letter of the law says on them. Once again, I think all of us were very happy that he reiterated the second part of the immigration debate that happens. Everybody always says the first part of the catechism of the Catholic Church with the immigration, like, oh, you have to let everybody in and all this other stuff. And then they forget that, oh, well, if you do come in, you have to go by the laws of the country you come into. You have to be a good citizen. You have to do all these other things. And I believe we're just finally kind of taking a deep breath that, oh, good, somebody actually mentioned the second part of the catechism and didn't just kind of ignore it, as a lot of other people tend to do. My only thing, and I'll be the griper of the group because somebody's got to be it on the, it might as well just be me, is the fact that it's, the USCCB, it's got about as much authority as the DMV. And the fact that, and I love, this is nothing negative to the bishops, because, I love the bishop of my diocese here in Austin, despite some of the things he's done. My loyalty is still to the bishop. But the fact is, the USCCB doesn't have really, the authority that it pretends to have. It's just a bureaucratic organization. And to reaffirm that supposed quote unquote authority just kind of allows them to continue to pick and choose what issues they want to highlight, when in reality they should be highlighting everything for Catholic teaching. And I guess that's just my gripe. I'll be the one dissenter on the entire group, which is fine. But I have to say, I was relieved to hear the Holy Father say that. I didn't really have anything a problem with it, and I think we were all kind of like, oh, Yeah, that's exactly what we wanted to hear. So that was very good of the Holy Father.
No,
All right,
I
ladies
agree. I think it's like a fresh of breath air for a lot of people, right? Because we were sorely lacking that for the past 15 years. I mean, to put it bluntly, during the pontificate of Francis, Pope Francis, love the Holy Father, but he oftentimes said things that were perhaps unclear, perhaps, a little abstract. And I agree with you, Rick. Leo is he's more measured. He definitely knows when to say stuff, and he knows, okay, I'd better not say anything, right? Because sometimes silence is the best answer. To be honest, you don't have to comment on every social issue of the day. You could just not say anything some days, and that's probably the best move 99% of the time. So
I wanted to touch up real quick,
Go ahead.
or finish up. You know, Pope Leo went straight to the law of the land, kind of redirected, circled back to that. If you really think about it, he took that, like you said, that canonical lawyer stance of, hey, whatever country you're living in, they have laws, they have cultures, whatever they have going on, you're pretty much in their hands, right? I mean, there's plenty of countries that would never allow what's going on here in the United States. I mean, you'd be extradited, and try that in Japan or
Try it
Switzerland
in
or
Mexico.
Germany. Yeah, yeah. Try coming in as a U.S. citizen with no visa and no papers in Japan or one of these countries. Show up, get in trouble when you get caught, and what would they do to you? They will put you in an airplane that same night right back to America. To the United States of America. So I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with Stefano as well. There are bad actors, but those people that have been here 20 years actually contributing, there should be a pathway to help them achieve,
No, sorry. I got to jump in. No amnesty ever. I don't feel it should
It's
be ever
fine.
be rewarded.
It's fine. Well, I just said that. I didn't say that Stefano said that. I said, I think
No.
that there should be a way to, to get people to become citizens, no matter how long they've been here. But I agree, Rick, there has to be a strong process where we know where these people are and who they are and where they're going. By no means am I saying open borders is okay.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that you are at all. It's just that we've had two examples of amnesty. We had the one in California, which turned that from a red state into what it is now, and then we had the Cuba. What happened, Angel? I'm sure you're aware of it. What happened in Miami when they gave pretty much amnesty to the Cuban refugees that came down there. The one in Cuba has actually been pretty much a net neutral. There hasn't been any kind of real negative aspects of that. But when you have amnesty, all it does is incentivize this type of behavior, which is this illegal immigration aspect, and it incentivizes breaking the law. And that's for me. And I have a very good friend. I consider him a good friend who's a priest who doesn't really. He's like, what? It's fine. He's more of that. It's okay kind of idea. And I always tell people I'm just hung up on the fact that they came in illegally. And I like the fact that Pope Leo gave the entire picture. Like, yes, we have laws, but yes, we should be charitable as well, right? When you have the whole rounded picture, it makes sense. But I just, I just have to say that.
And the question is politically, what is the balance, right? How do we treat these people like humans in a humane way, but yet follow the rule of the law of the land and make sure that everyone that's here is here legally? So there's a balance, right? And who decides these things is the Supreme Court, right? So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. All right, and so let's get on to the next topic of the night. It was that video. This video has been making the rounds. And I want the vets on the panel, on the council to watch and react to this. This is Democrats kind of running out their veterans and giving a message to all those in the military about what to do with the orders from President Donald Trump.
I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin. Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris DeLuzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow. I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
and the intelligence community
who take risks each day to keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens.
like us. You all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just from abroad, but from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law.
Or our Constitution.
We know this is hard.
And that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
Army,
Our Navy,
The Air Force.
Your vigilance is critical.
and know that we have your back.
because now, more than ever,
The American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws.
our Constitution,
And who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
don't give up.
don't give up.
Don't give up the ship.
That's weird when like the Air Force says that, because that's like a Navy thing. Anyway, so my first thing is, okay, now it's cool to say no to, as a person who never served, but I know I have a lot of good friends and members on this panel that have. Cool that we can now, disobeying illegal orders is cool. And secondly, if you're a member of the military and you're watching this, would you trust any of those Democrats to have your back in any way, shape, or form if it's not a political issue? We'll go Trad and then Angel.
No, hilarious to see that video. It's just the pandering is palpable. I mean, just you can tell they're just reading off all these lines, and I just love, the fact that they think that that's how it works, that you can just disobey what you consider, you lowly E1 private nobody, what you consider to be an unlawful order. It's like, that's not how that works. That's not how the chain of command works. Anybody in the military understands military hierarchy. These orders are coming from your commanding officers, from your NCOs, etc. And to see like sitting congressmen, senators, etc., basically in violation of Title 18, U.S. Criminal Code 2387, that's sedition, knowingly urging, advising, counseling members of the armed forces to disobey lawful orders. That's already against, U.S. Criminal Code. So, I mean, it's laughable that the pandering has gotten to this point where it was unlawful 4 years ago, when all the mandates were coming through from the big, the scary COVID. But now, because we're upholding the law and because we're trying to enforce our immigration laws and whatnot, now they're unlawful. It's like, okay, it's purely political. It's purely a ploy just to pander to gullible and easily manipulated people, pull on their heartstrings and get them to be like, oh no, the servicemen, they're following unlawful orders. Okay, dude, I've had to mop in the rain before as a boot, so I've had to do some really bad things in the military, like things that I thought were unlawful, but I had to do them anyway, but that's just how the military works. And yeah, it's laughable, but I'll throw it to Angel.
Being a civil affairs MCO and a civil affairs team, I can tell you that we get attached to all kinds of military entities. They have a lot of different cultures within the military. They're like their own monster. Engineers are their own monster. Infantry is their own monster. Special forces are their own monster. But as civil affairs, you get attached to anybody. And sometimes we augment psychological operations, PSYOPs. In the Army, we call it 37 Foxes. Well, this is clearly a PSYOP by the left. And call me what you want, but I'm me, the consul, I'm very vocal about it. I don't care about the repercussions. I'm going to say what I think and what I want. I'm in a free country. I can exercise my free speech, right? And I can tell you that is a deliberate, professional, well-composed, psychological video to attack those that are on the fringe of what they should do and what they should not do in the military. They are in the pre-stages of inciting an insurgency in our country, and this continues, and this is a precursor to all that. Like we talked about on the last segment, on the last episode, things are more volatile now under Trump than they were under Biden, because things are being kind of undone and being turned back to the to what the United States of America, was, described by the founding fathers, right? Republic, right? Democratic Republic. But let's just think about that. I think this is a deliberate psychological operation towards those troops that are on the fringe of what they should do and not do. And I can tell you, if I were to be activated right now, boots on the ground somewhere, attached to some place, and I have X amount of soldiers under me, and they want to disobey, well, that's on them. And they're not serving. They're not. I mean, being a conscientious objector for your own personal reasons happens all the time. But I say don't fear that. The majority of the United States military is on the side of the commander in chief, and those that don't want to be involved in politics, like myself, like I just don't care. I want to serve, the country, the Constitution, and what we stand for, no matter what it means. And obviously, my faith is most important to me. The ethics behind my as a Catholic man on how I lead others. Mercia, anything to say? Should I get you started?
Sorry. Get me started. I don't know. I don't have any comment since I don't have experience
Yeah,
in the military.
it's easy to say, outside of the military, what you would have been do. I think I really want to jump back and emphasize Angel's point that you're seeing such an attempt at dissension that the left always accuses the right of fomenting civil war, fomenting unrest, fomenting dissension, doing the isms and all these other things. But when it comes to it, it is the left that projects, the Democrats that projects, because it is what the Democrats are actually doing. They're trying to actively foment dissension within the ranks of the armed forces, which that's the lowest circle of hell, essentially, traitors and mutineers, and it's sad to see happen. It's not a shock. I'm not confusing shock with sadness. It's not a shock. It's just disappointing to see this happen, and to see these things feel like it's continuing to spiral out of control. All right, now that we kind of warmed up and we've gone through our technical issues and we've gotten our feet wet tonight, let's look at our main focus tonight, which is the logistics of charity here on the Council of St. Michael. We want to prep not just for ourselves, but for our neighbors. And this idea in prepping is it's kind of a hot button issue. Some Catholics don't believe in prepping because they believe that God will provide if you go by certain scripture. They also don't believe that it is a charitable thing to hog resources in an event that something may not be happening when those resources can go to other people. You'll find many Catholics that don't want to prep because they don't feel they need to. But this idea of prepping not for yourself but for your neighbors, once again, we're talking about it. Most people go to disaster, doomsday prepper, all these other kinds of things when you really could just be prepping for your day-to-day life. And really, even more, you could swap out prepping for homesteading. And that's where we really want to grab, that's why we're really, really lucky to have our guest tonight who can kind of highlight the Catholic land movement's commitment to things like homesteading. If you want to, Stefano, if you want to kind of take the ball from there and maybe go a little bit further into that.
Sure, I think it goes a little bit beyond, like you were saying, just this false notion that prepping is solely focused on anything doomsday scenario, but rather out of now in a Catholic lens, we can say, how do we become enabled to live off of everything that God does provide and use that effectively for our family units, for the church at large, and our neighbors included. How do we give back charitably with what we are given, right? We develop our talents, we develop our skills. Everyone brings something different to the table. We cannot serve each other by being islands. It is impossible. And that's what's beautiful about entities or communities that emerge out of things like the Catholic land movement, because that's the whole point. How do we give back to the local community through local economy by making rich Catholic families that are empowered by having a homestead?
Yeah, and I once again love watching the evolution of the Catholic land movement. Love watching how your message is being just embraced really wholeheartedly by so many people. And if you look at the idea of getting into prepping, getting into homestepping, get whatever phrase you want to use by that, we can look at this first point, the Catholic call to preparedness. There is a Catholic call to being prepared. You can use the mother of all virtues, prudence, which it's not timid, it's not fear, it's or shrewdness in worldly pursuits. It's practical wisdom. And practical wisdom is you're going to be better off if you have access to your own food, access to your own water supply, access to your own goods instead of being reliant on somebody else. One of the famous things of totalitarian authority is he who controls the food controls the population. Whatever the case may be, you could even look back through 2020, the fears people had during that crisis, or anytime there's a natural disaster. What's the first thing that is looted or gone after? It is convenience stores, it is grocery stores, it is pharmacies, it's all these kinds of things. And so, using prudence, you say, okay, well, I see how the world reacts in these crisis periods. So, using this wisdom, it is a call to prepare. And that's where we kind of have to look at people who do not agree with the idea of prepping, or we don't need to prep, and just say, well, listen, it's especially the men of the household that we're talking to, like, listen, it is your job as the male and the head of the household to actually ensure that the rest of your family is cared for. So it's very interesting to see and when you actually break down some of the ideas of the logistics of charity, being prepared, prepping is a charitable act, because you will be able to have that charity to, the most important group most of us will have in this lifetime is our individual families. So we'll go Angel, Trad, and then Stefano down the line in response to that first point.
Yeah, Rick, I in the prepping community, we have a saying, homesteaders are already preppers. They just don't know it, right? The way they live their lives, livestock, they live in seasons, like I said last segment, not in holidays. Um, procure your own food, barter, live by the natural law and the law of God through the land. These people are already almost completely self-sufficient. And then there's other preppers in which we talk about the lone wolves with the bus that's in the they put a hole in the ground, put a bus or a shipping container, a bunker, the old Vietnam vet with a bunker, MREs and guns, and thinks he's going to survive, right? I mean, he's going to run out of MREs and bullets eventually, and then what? And if he doesn't practice anything else or establishes a community of charity like we're talking about, um, you're doomed, right? You have nothing. That's why I'm always an advocate of starting with the bushcraft and survival, and then gardening, and then work your way up from there. To me, firearms are very far away when it comes to prepping. You'll get there eventually. It's like advanced prepping, right? You start, but community is the most important thing. If you can gather a group of people, a group of homesteaders, specifically speaking of the Catholic land movement, which I know we're going to be talking about that a lot tonight. If you get a group of Catholics that are living off the land and bartering with each other and establish their own economic system of goods, if you pose a question to them, if the grid were to go down, or any event, it can be the grid, it can be a food shortage, we can go through waves of everything. What would they do, right? So I think that the Catholic land movement is something that we've been waiting for as Catholic preppers. I don't know how many other Catholic prepper influencers there are out there. Maybe I can take the claim to be the first one. I don't know, but you know, when I established my channels, that was my mission. I had a passion, and yep, I see what you're putting up there, putting me in the spotlight.
Exactly. Well, that's some of the stuff you actually did. That was that this weekend?
Yeah, past weekend we went to and again, not a plug. I'm not endorsed by them, but it's the SC Knife Company. The guy called Patrick Randall. He's a survivalist, bushcrafter. Been teaching it for 20 plus years. We went up there to northern Alabama. Took my son up, and brushed up on some skills, shelter, fire making. Everything you can do with just a bushcraft knife is fascinating. If you really think about it, it's just like the Native Americans did, right? I mean, we were able to make everything to create a shelter and hunting tools with a bushcraft knife. And it's fascinating of how little do we need. But without others and without a community, we would be in it wouldn't be something that can be continuous. It would eventually become exhausting, and those civilization communities, if they're off grid, they wouldn't survive without community.
No, excellent stuff there, Angel. No, I saw your post and I saw your bushcraft. It got me excited. I need to get out more. I need to hone my skills. I'm very, very rusty on the bushcraft stuff, but you lit a fire in me, man. So I need to get back out there. But no, to what Rick was saying initially, I think a lot of Catholics, and I'll speak to Catholics specifically, but this broadly applies to a lot of people in getting into the space. They see prepping as sort of a selfish endeavor, where it can be seen as hoarding resources, not providing for everyone else. But as Catholics, we understand that we have a hierarchy of obligation, right? Obligation to God, obligation to our family, our friends. It sort of radiates outward from the self, right? As a father, as a husband, I have an obligation to my wife, but I have an obligation to my children to protect and provide for them as best as I'm able, because that's the vocation, that's the role in which God put me, right? So, after I've taken care of the family, so to speak, then I can radiate outwards to my family or to my friends, to my coworkers, my peers, my colleagues, and then, my neighbors in my community, people, I wave, every once in a while as I drive down the street. I don't know them on a personal level, but you have a sort of hierarchical level of obligation. And for Catholics in prepping, it first and foremost is not paranoia, like what Rick is saying. It's stewardship. It's stewardship of those under your care, those in your charge, right? You must be able to protect your family, provide for them, and nurture them, right? And especially as a father and husband, and even if you're not in that vocation of married life, the next ring of that, you know, hierarchical love, so to speak, is your extended family. It can be your friends, it can be, your peers, and so on and so forth. But the idea that prepping is stewardship first and foremost, and you can easily mold that into prudential love and charity for those directly around you and in your circles. So um, a lot of people kind of misinterpret what prepping means, but at the heart of it all, it's just stewardship. It's stewardship of your family, your friends, and your neighbors.
So Stefano, I want to kind of toss you the this question about the Catholic approach to all this, and obviously the Catholic land movement. That's what they're doing. How do you explain the Catholic approach to getting into this type of lifestyle?
I like that you asked that. I wanted to, and it segues to what we were talking before. I wanted to clarify that the beginning of it has to come with preparedness of the soul, right? And we're all tainted by the effects of sin, the consequences of sin. And the more that we detach and learn to detach from our own iniquity, the more we can hone our soul to allow to have the virtues, right? And we need to gain and practice of the virtues. Then comes all the worldly things of practicing the virtues. We cannot give what we don't have. So I I think a very valuable place where one would be, want to call it prepping or otherwise, we can't give to our neighbor, we can't give to our family if we don't hone in something or another or become versed in many things. I mean, everyone's gonna, like I mentioned earlier, bring something different to the table, and it's not just in, maybe in the prepping community, your basic necessities and being maybe good and self-reliant in them. Um, it could even be, do you have the skill of working on something at home, like your own car? Forgotten skills, um, or just being crafty, trying to figure things out in the moment. Um, things don't come out of thin air. We have to practice them. And then we can lend, if we're good at something or we try to be good at something, we can offer that in both education to someone else and or in the spur of the moment help someone in a time of necessity. Um, but again, I want to reiterate, I think the most important thing is preparedness of the soul. If we don't have that first, then everything else just will fall apart, because what if you could be prepared with all the material goods, but in a moment of crisis, your soul being empty, you don't know how you're going to react. We're all human. We could we could all react in a very strange manner. We could become the looter.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because if you go in with the mindset of, okay, I'm going to have all these things, without the correct Catholic mindset, the correct mindset there, your focus is not going to be on the correct, your order will be out of whack. Instead of having your order being God and then family and then these things, it will be things. And then once you start, that will tempt you away from being the provider, from being the protector, from being the spiritual leader in that time of crisis. So I think that's a really valuable thing that you brought up there, is that before we get into this, obviously you want to get into it, but just like everything else, you want to make sure you're going into it for the right reason, right? You don't want to be the king of the hill with all the fancy stuff, right? You don't want to have the most material things. You want to make sure that you're doing this for the glory of God. Eventually, that is what we should all be striving for in all actions, is for the glory of God in that regard. So excellent point, which can bring us into point two, which is this building of supplies with service in mind, the practical ways to stock food, water, medical gear, and essentials, not just for your household, but this is an interesting point, but for potentially the charitable aspect of, maybe there'll be others within your neighborhood or within your community, or in an extreme, once again, an extreme situation, somebody passing by, a family that's coming by, and you could give them a bag of canned goods or whatever the case may be to help them along their way. So it's very interesting when we look at the supplies, and when we say practical, because, and I know Angel will kind of get a kick out of what I'm saying, when you get into prepping, there's all these goodies and all these wacky things, like he mentioned the bunker and all this other kind of stuff. You can go crazy with some of the doomsday prepper stuff. Like, I've got an air purifier that'll purify 77,000 cubic tons of air in an hour. It's like, that's great, but like, if you're going to need that, why don't you get a couple plants? That might work better. But the fact is, we can kind of get lost, some say even autistic, into these types of areas. And then once again, as Stefano said, you kind of lose the message, where I have a lot of the stuff, but all my stuff needs electricity and we just got hit with an EMP. Well, oops. So it's kind of one of those things. So as we all do, I'm going to actually go bottom to top. I want Stefano to start with that idea. And also, if you want to throw out some practical ways of probably, water, food, things like that from your experience or what you've heard from other people as well.
I think one of the big things is forgetting how to be reliant on on having necessity be the motivating factor to do things. I'll give an example of an experience that I had over the weekend. I had to figure out quickly how to improvise when a car part didn't work on my car. Had to go to a recommended shop, and in the spur of the moment, some Venezuelans just knocked it out. Got the strip bolt to come out, and I was able to recover the original part that I was going to throw out. And we've been conditioned into a culture of everything is so disposable. Just because we have effective currency that we can go and quickly become consumers more than we become producers of anything. And we're so highly conditioned to that that it makes things a little scary if we don't revert back to trying to do anything about it. Um, how how do we feed the soul, right? If we're not also feeding ourselves and vice versa. Um, so I think departures in all senses, departures in the religious practice, departures in um, how we live our daily lives. I think it's very recent in the history of humanity that we're in general as a people not. I mean, you go to other countries, people don't have a lot, and they make things happen because they don't have, because they are poor. And I don't, we're conditioned against that, at least in this country or in the West in general, because we have a lot, and a lot is so disposable. I urge that we can hopefully learn to get away from that in some capacities.
No, excellent stuff. I think I agree with Stefano's point. You know, with excess comes waste a lot of the time, right? We live in a very decadent society. We live in a society that puts the material above the spiritual many, many times. And a lot of people lack that ordered, right? They lack the order of things where it's the spiritual first and then the material. Um, and I'll touch on the second half of the point before I move on to the practical ways. You know, going back to the whole charitable preparedness, right? Having charity. Charity is a chief, one of the chief virtues in our Catholic faith. So many say it is the chief virtue. Um, but like I mentioned in my first point, the charity must be bound to your hierarchy and your obligations as well, right? I wouldn't be charitable to my family and my friends if I, you know, gave all of our prepared food to the guy across the street because he really, really needs it, right? Without tending to the needs of my household first. So it must be guided, right? Your charity must be guided by the principle of obligation. Um, but again, it's also something that we have to be prepared for because whether you like it or not, you live in a community. You're going to deal with people. You interact with people who are not necessarily close to you, right? But out of charity, out of love for God, out of seeing our Lord, even in the lowliest of these ones next to me, right? We have to be able to care for them, to provide for them, to make sure that even if it's in some small way, giving them the aid that they need so that they can make it a little bit longer, right? If that means hey, I have 3 days worth of MREs, or if it's like here's some clean drinking water, what have you, or here's a solar power bank, charge your phones, etc. There's many different ways that you can incorporate charity into your preparedness so that you can be that anchor for your community and for your neighbors. I'll tell you a lot of the times, and you look at recent events, the various hurricanes in the Gulf, natural disasters, etc. Communities who would otherwise have little or nothing to do with each other when crap hits the fan, all of a sudden now they're banding together, now they're you know building these bonds, building this fellowship, and helping each other, right? And it's a beautiful thing to see. It's sort of the altruism of humanity, that humanness that we all share. We're altruistic. We have a desire to help people. We have a desire to render aid when we can, because we see the likeness and image of God in every person, right? But at the same time, it has to be balanced with, I have to prepare for myself. I have to prepare for my family, of course, and make sure that my obligation and my priorities in my charity are ordered first. And then I can, again, you can radiate that outwards to, those in your community, those around you, those who are desperate and in need. But looking at some practical ways for preparing food, look at what kind of storage you're going to be looking at. Are you, dry foods, canned foods, freeze dried foods, things like that. Those are some practical ways you could store food that will last a long time. Aren't going to be necessarily needing a lot of maintenance. MRAs are always good. Something that you can keep in a dark, cool place, that's not really prone to sunlight. A lot of these things are going to be what you could use to keep your food and prepare in a practical sense. So, like what Angel was saying, if you're a homesteader, you're sort of prepping already, right? If you're canning, if you're growing your own crops, if you are, somewhat self-reliant and not really going to the grocery store all that often, if you slaughter your own chickens, your own livestock, etc., you're just about there for the most part, right? There's maybe a few things you may need some help on, but the more self-reliant you can be, the less burden it's going to be, when stuff goes down, when you have a grid down scenario, when you have, chaos in the streets, you're a little bit more prepared than the average person to fend for yourself. So that's sort of what I would suggest for a lot of people, and make sure that you have that hierarchy and you're ordering your charity, in a sensible way.
Yeah, Trad and Stefano. I mean, you guys made like some great points. And sorry, Rick, you get to go last. You got to hear our rants, but what else is new, right?
Yeah, that's my job. But hey, hopefully, if you say enough stuff, I don't have to talk. So that's probably the best part.
So if we go to the end of what prepping is, and this is where I always start. If someone comes up to me and be like, "Hey, I heard you were a prepper," I'm like, "Well, yeah, but why are you saying that? What's the goal, right?" The end goal would be to survive a period of time, like cataclysmic event, in which you will have no way of procuring food, water, or any sustainable way to sustain a community in the grocery store or a farmer's market. You might have a bad crop. Who knows? So the idea is that we get ready for these events. I mean, that's what I think of. In order to get there, we go back again hundreds of years, maybe, I don't know, 15 to 1700s. The European settlers came. What did they come with? They came with a ship, some farm animals, some seeds, and they built cabins and farmed the land and hunted to survive. As we know, Roanoke and several other examples did not make it, but some did, right? Some of these communities actually live to what we know of what the United States of America is now, right? In the early colonies. So we learned from the natives, because when the natives met these colonists, they learned how the natives were doing it. And they've been there way longer than the Europeans, right? In the States. So we have ways of learning how to survive, how to live off the land. And it comes to the point where we'll have to mix a little bit of everything. But the reality is building, I'm reading your bullet point right now, building supplies with service in mind. I believe that's one of the most difficult parts of prepping, because it's almost like finances, right? How much are you going to share? And I'm on point with Stefano that the faith part comes in, because we can hoard, we can have a homestead that is almost nearly 100% self-sufficient, because we've established a community, a network. We're bartering with each other. Now, when someone from the outside comes that's not contributing anything, how do we establish that service? How do we establish that wisdom that the Holy Spirit is granting us at that moment? if we're in charge of our homestead, everyone is in survival mode, trying to steal a can of beans or a corn cob to feed their family. And that's what we see in a lot of these fictional stories of prepping. You have people that come upon a farm. They're either sick, looking for a doctor, or they haven't had anything to eat in days. And they want you to feed them. They want you to take care of them. And then the communities have a console and they say, well, you know, who's going to vote to let this family in? They can have a disease and kill us all. Or they can have, you know, who knows, right? I think that is the most difficult part of prepping, would be building supplies of service in mind. But as Catholics, as Christians, as centering God in the center of our service and everything we do, God's work in the center of our lives, and finding any opportunity to serve through what we do on our daily lives. You know, you see things like the Catholic land movement. You know, I'm like really looking in the future and thinking, man, whoever's involved in this is going to come out of this pretty you know, they're going to come out of this okay. Because I mean, imagine a network of homesteads that is going back 150 years before everything was industrialized. Sorry, Mercy, I'm taking your plug here. You know, everything was industrialized, and they're depending on each other to survive. I mean, I know some great families in the cattle land movement that are, you know, that some have bees, some have cattle, some love farming their land, some make cider. I believe your friend Mike Sharon there, and if he's listening to this, yeah, I'm gonna point him out right now. He has a ridiculous homestead with some awesome things, and he's a great example. He's the epitome of what prepping is. And I mean, the guy grows like heirloom apples and makes his own cider, you know? I mean, that's uh, these are people that are going to be leaders when the time comes. And when it comes to charity, and when it comes to prepping and stockpiling things like canning or procuring our food in a bartering system. I can go on forever, Rick, and I'm Cuban, so you're going to have to like just tell me to shut up. So I'll mute myself.
Okay, I'll remember that for the next time. I'll get the hook ready for that. The last thing I'm going to say, and then we'll move on to that, is to be interested, and I know a couple guys actually brought this up and talked about this, is that what do we do when we've got our bubble set and the unknown is introduced? I've always been a big fan of this mindset of, yes, prepping is for us and for our families and our communities, and also for the opportunity to be charitable for two reasons. A, charity is something that we should always seek to do as Catholics, but B, being charitable in these situations can avoid instances of violence, because if you have sparing a couple cans of food and a couple MREs to a family and help them along the road will potentially, now I know there's two sides to every coin, could potentially avoid that father trying to do ungodly things to provide for his kids, because as every parent on this council knows, if it comes to feeding your children, you will do whatever it takes to feed those children. So there is the idea of, okay, well, it's not the greatest thing in the world that I have to give away some of my preps, but if this will avoid a situation of violence, then we're going to have to suffer a little bit more to make that happen. Now, of course, I understand the opposite side of that coin, meaning you can't give to every single person that comes, because then potentially you'll run out. So it is something to take aware of, and that you're going to have to go with, prayer, and hopefully you will be directed in that way. Now let's move on to the third point: community before calamity. How to identify parish needs, from small men's groups to building local support groups before an emergency hits, which is, we've talked about it on this program time and time again. Fraternity is a big thing for men, being able to lock arms with other men and having groups, and then building up from there. Of course, the first group that you should have in line is your family. That should be the first group that's in line, but then moving out, so that way, for lack of a better term, you have an idea who you can and who you cannot possibly rely on when an emergency happens. So top to bottom, Angel, Trad, and then Stefano.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on this in a different concept earlier, or a different form. Without community, you're gonna have, a lot of problems when the time comes. And I think this is probably number two on that list of the most difficult bullet point there to establish, because in our parish, for example, or parishes in this city where I live in, a lot of urban and suburban families are thriving. We have very little homes, very few homesteaders or preppers, and that is going to cause a problem. But if the time comes that people will have to procure food and water and create long-lasting communities, because urban and suburban families are going to be in a pinch when it comes to farming the land and raising, livestock to have a sustainable form of survival. I mean, you can become a hunter gatherer any day. You can go 10, 15 miles into the wilderness away from a city and, hunt deer and alligator or wherever you live, right? Eat snare squirrels and rabbits and live almost indefinitely if you know what you're doing. You'll probably get tired of it, but the reality is, the community part is going to be the most difficult part. I mean, I know, even with the Catholic land movement in the area where I live, it's been a tough nut to crack, like they say. People are not wanting to have these conversations, and I've tried. Some areas, I think Texas is more open to this whole prepping thing. I'm not sure why. Maybe the Texans can give me more insight on why you guys are more open. The parishes there are more open to security measures with the recent shootings and forming a community of people that will help each other in an event of supply lines, or when you guys had those the blizzard. So establishing your community is going to vary from place to place, and I think that that's number two there. You're just going to have to find your group. I mean, I have people that when a hurricane hits here and the power goes out, they'll show up at my door with their own stuff and want to be here, because they know I have everything else. We have the air conditioner and the power and the generators, and we got all the creature comforts because we've been planning for years already. And I think it's a matter of establishing that community and just making sure that when the time comes, everyone can contribute. But that's going to be number two on my list.
No, excellent stuff, Andrew. I think your answer to the Texas thing, I think it's just because when we're told not to do something, we just do it. I think that's just it's just the rugged, Western sort of, perseverance, you could say, for Texans. If you tell us not to do something, okay, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Um, but to the point here, and I guess for the audience listening too, for a lot of us here, we've had bonds. I know myself, right? I served in the military. I have a lot of buddies who I've formed strong bonds with over the years. And I know they have my back, in a pinch. And over the years, I've formed bonds with people in my everyday life, people I go to the gun range with, my coworkers, my peers, etc. But for the audience listening, you're gonna have to go out there, and it's not going to fall in your lap. You have to form these bonds. You have to build this community. If you really want a community around you to help you in a calamity, to help you in, a natural disaster, or to help you in any kind of situation, you got to go out there and you have to build these bonds yourself. I mean, you could start small. You could start with your local parish, with your local men's guild, your St. Joseph's guild, your Knights of Columbus guild. Start with your coworkers. If you go to the gun range at all, talk to people at the range. Don't be like introverted and weird and not talk to anybody. You got to go out there and make these connections if you want to form this community. And hey, sometimes you'll meet people and you'll align perfectly, and you'll make a lifelong friend. Otherwise you'll meet people more on the fringes, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I probably don't want him in my community, but he's good to know, for future reference. But either way, right, you're gathering information, and you're able to, organically and at your own pace, sort of build these bonds and have a network of people who are at the very least of like mind to yourself, right? At the very least, they have the mentality that prepping is something that we all should be doing. Prepping is something that is essential for not just the protection of yourself in a disastrous situation, but if you have a family at all, if you're a husband, if you're a father, you could make sure that your wife, your children are taken care of, that those around you, that you're obligated, you're acting as you should, as your obligation requires. And it's tough. I don't fault anybody, because again, like my Angel, like myself, we formed bonds with I formed bonds with my Marine brothers over the years while I was active duty. I mean, these guys, I have some of them I haven't talked to in about a year, but I can pick up the phone tomorrow and they'd come to my house and help me out with anything. Like I formed these bonds because of these unique circumstances we've been in. But building a community is first and foremost, right? Nobody is an island. Nobody can do this alone. You have to have bonds of fellowship. You have to have these bonds of brotherhood so that you can, you know, rely on other people, because you can't do it all yourself. You can't. It's just not feasible. I mean, there's only so much a single person can do on their own. I know it's cool in the movies to like Jason Bourne this thing and be a super spy and go out there and you know run the show, be a lone wolf. But in the real world, right, you by your lonesome is not going to do all that much against the gang of raiders 10, 15, 20 strong. It's just not going to happen.
And
Or you're
Trad,
not.
and
Oh yeah,
Trad,
yeah.
even if you guys are in Texas and we're in Florida and we can communicate with you and we have skills and knowledge of how to do certain things in a cataclysmic event, it will save your life. I may know something you don't, you may know something I don't. And if we form a mesh and network, which is in the making, it's a top secret project right now. Yes, I said that word. Um, and Mercy is laughing, but yes, it is. Right now, I can't get much into it. But if we form a mesh, a network, and communicate with each other, um, we're going to be in a way better situation than a lot of other people. I mean, what do you think, Trad? I mean,
No, yeah, I mean that's a great idea, and obviously, I mean, not to you know get too much into it, but I mean, mesh networks are real. Meshtastic, if you know anything about that, I would highly recommend looking that up. That's going to be a future episode, I'm sure. Rick, we could talk about that later, but no, I mean, I'm totally in favor of that. I mean, again, you will come across things in your neck of the woods, or neck of the Everglades, I should say, that I that I down here or over here in Texas have never been, all too privy to, and vice versa, right? But to the point, how do you build these communities? You do so by networking. You do so by getting out there. A lot of Catholics, and I know this personally, because I have to admit, I was this person. I was this person who would just go to mass and not interact with anybody. I would just go to the gun range and not interact with anybody. I would just go to work and not interact. I was that guy for years. And then I really started getting into prepping. I really started thinking about the future, and obviously the Marine Corps shaped a lot of what I think about, but it helped me realize, okay, I can't do this alone. You have to build a community. And how can you do that? Simply putting yourself out there. I mean, that's ultimately what you're going to have to do. It's not going to fall in your lap. You got to put the work in if you want it to work. And yeah, no, that's pretty much it.
So, Stefano, when do you get called to do a lot of presentations for small men's groups, for parishes? If you do, what do you lead with, and what happens if the last part of the question is, what happens if you get just a completely dead audience that's not receptive to you? How do you approach any of those things?
I mean, in any of that scenario, you have to pivot. It's a matter of knowing your audience. If you don't know your audience, the worst thing that you can do is continue reiterating yourself and making yourself sound like an idiot, because you're not going to communicate anything effectively. So it's a matter of knowing who you're talking to and learning how to connect at, if you can, at a personal level with your audience. But I wanted to add to everything that was being mentioned. Um, I like some of the new, well, not new, but revivals of old methods of um, the passing down of education of skills. Something in the Catholic land movement that has been being talked about is how can we redevelop and revive the idea of the medieval guilds for passing down of basic or what used to be basic skills, be it carpentry, masonry, things of that nature. How can I mean, and I think it extends into the use of newer technologies, let's say HVAC or plumbing. You have the trades, right? But how do we form within our communities guilds that not only pass that down generationally, but pass that down from family to family and make at at a moment's notice that you can call on reliable service work um, from the community. It's not just the homesteading, but it's also all the surrounding necessity of service. Let's say you need a carpenter to build something quick, improvised, or a metal worker. That doesn't come out of thin air. What Trad was saying, you need to be prepared. You need to develop the skills. And sure, it starts in the social setting by learning who you're around and not being a stranger to people. But it can't stay there either. The men's groups can't be just the social only. You want to get together so that you can talk about all the things theological and social teaching, and it can't stay there either. What can men do together that are best beneficial for the community, priests, brothers, nuns, and for families? How do we build new churches? How do we build new communities? How do we build um, new monasteries? I have connection through Catholic land movement. I just made beautiful connection of some nuns in High Springs, Florida, that are looking to build their monastery. They needed someone to help. They had no engineer. They were looking to hire and spend a bunch of money on an engineer. And I got a new tip to a contact through Catholic land movement. Hey, I'm an engineer. I no questions asked, didn't even meet this person yet. Immediately send that to the Carmelite nuns in High Springs, and what do you know? Now he's doing charity work for them as an engineer.
That's a great example right there. That's such a great example of community and networking, and not only establishing these networks. I think Trad told me he had a heart out, so I think he's gone. So have a good one, buddy. He just says he got to bug out. Thanks, buddy. Always helpful. But yes, the idea of not only establishing these groups, but what to do when you have them established, right? It's great to have them, but what are you going to do once we have them established? We've kind of covered mutual aid a couple times. We've talked about mutual aid, the idea of the Good Samaritan. If you want to review and look into that, folks, it's a great way to kind of look into the idea of Catholic charity, the idea of assistance, and you can kind of, parse that out on your own. We've definitely talked about that pretty in depth here. And then finally, both Angel and Stefano can speak to this idea of sustainable stewardship, strategies for organizing, rotating, and managing resources so you can give generously without compromising family stability. Let's go, Angel, and then Stefano with this idea of making sure that once you have your resources, once you have your group, the having a good stewardship, a good management of these resources.
Yeah, Rick, this is the that statement or words, sustainable stewardship. That is the epitome of the end goal of prepping. When we talk about why are we prepping, how do we prep, what we're not prepping out of paranoia or panic. We're prepping out of preparing to be self-sustainable. At least if being completely self-sustainable is a 10, even if we're a 2, we are probably ahead of 90% of the population. That's how serious this is. And then when we talk about the Catholic land movement, since I came on board in Florida, and became a member years ago, I've been excited. I've been waiting, just waiting I believe it's such a concept that epitomizes that's a big word, isn't it? Epitomizes sustainable stewardship in every aspect and centering the faith. Like Stefano was saying earlier, we don't have that wisdom of the faith and centering our Catholic faith in all this. When the time comes, we're not going to know, we're not going to make the right choices. We need that spiritual guidance to know what to do and when to do it, right? As you know, Rick, anyone can, or not anyone, but I know you're a talented firearms guy, so you can train firearms, become proficient, teach others when the time comes. I'm sure you will, the right people, and it all trickles down from there, right? We all have something to provide, something to give, a skill to teach when the time comes. I just want to focus that on the right group of people. And to me, it's Catholics. And if there's any non-Catholics around, you're also included in this. I challenge you to take the ethics and the moral law of Catholicism and apply it to your lives, so you know how to go about it when there's a life and death situation. And I know we're talking about all this like the world's going to end, but organizations like the Catholic Land Movement are not doing it because the world's going to end. They're doing it because it's a way of life. And I think it's fascinating, and that's what attracts me to it. It's the fascination of going back to antiquity to live sustainably and connect with each other. But I'll pass it on here.
I like that you touched on the preparedness of the soul again. And I was going to mention this before when we were talking about the building supplies and what do we do when we need to offer that in mutual aid to maybe someone external or even within the community. Let's say the community could be self-sufficient and you have one of these calamities that you don't have a yield in your own crop or what the community is used to being reliant on, and that falls apart or erodes or runs out. And I think one of the major methods of practically preparing the soul is learning how to do proper fasting. And in proper fasting, a byproduct of it is being prepared both spiritually, mentally, and physically to neglect yourself against food in times of need. Because I mean, for lack of a better word, how many of us have become hangry so easily, right? But can we temper ourselves and be prudent and be charitable in those times of urgent need? Because if we've not trained ourselves in the absence of food, I think it would be very beneficial to revive the proper practice of fasting in a seasonal basis according to the liturgical calendar, and then, I mean, if we're called to it, extend that further. I've embarked on some extreme fasting of my own when called to it through prayer. For Holy Week, I like doing the entire week of no food.
Yep, me too. I do that. I've done that. Minimum, I'll do Thursday to Sunday, but I've done a couple where I've done coffee and water from Monday to Sunday. So, and maybe even the coffee might be a little bit of a cheat, but I've gone.
It is. There's sugars in there.
Wow. Yeah, you only do so much. you know,
Electrolyte water.
Yeah.
Have good salts.
Can you do a good stout, or like the medieval monks did, or is that
you can. I mean, it's permitted. It's the liquids aren't food, so I'm just looking at it in a contemporary standpoint.
Sure.
I took it to the extreme. Calories are calories. I just want to eliminate it all. But no, it's
in my own
an extreme.
defense, it was black coffee. In my own defense, it was black coffee. So there was as much. I'm trying to make myself feel better here. So it was as much. It was as basic of calorie content as possible. But no, I agree.
Black coffee. It's the only way.
Yeah, it is. It's bitter like my soul. But the fact
No, it
of the
shouldn't be.
matter,
When you have good coffee, it's sweet.
it is. Yeah, it is. It's uplifting, and coffee is Catholic, so of course in that regard. But that's something that preppers need. Catholics, we need to bring back more and more, which is the idea of fasting. And the church, even as you said, we have the Ember Days. We have those built in for the changing of seasons, which is a shame that we don't have those anymore, because even 4 times a year is something that it very American. We can't even do a fast for 4 times a year. We can't even do it for Lent. We can only do Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, and everything else you're kind of on your own. And so we have to really hearken back to that primal, that basic nature of. And I don't know if you gentlemen can harp up on this more. The more you dig into it, this idea that 3 meals a day and all these other kinds of things is really just a byproduct of American consumerism and modernity. When you look back to our ancestors, it maybe if they had 1 meal a day, it would be like maybe a big lunch dinner in the middle of the day between the morning harvest and then the afternoon harvest, and then they would come home and they were so tired they would go to bed. They weren't like, all right, let's make some chicken pot pie now. So this idea of
I do that often. I do that often, just out
The
of
chicken
being
pot
so
pie?
busy sometimes. No, I mean I do that too, but out of necessity and just out of circumstance, I prefer sometimes not being bogged down by having to eat so many times through the day, and eat one substantial meal that is like a breakfast, lunch, dinner,
Yep.
and that's it.
Yeah.
Kind of, you have to figure that out, listen to your body, and understand what works.
As those of you know, with many children, you make one big meal and have a lot of leftovers, and people can continue eating that all day.
Yep. Yeah. But even you guys are completely right. But just trying to break, let's just use Americans and people out of the idea of you don't have to have breakfast, or even people that you do 16-hour fast when you're like, oh yeah, I do 16-hour fast from 8 to noon, and they're like, so you don't eat breakfast? It's like, yes, no, I love breakfast, don't you get me wrong. Chicken and waffles is the greatest invention probably after sliced bread. But the fact of the matter is, I know I'm full of it tonight. I'm full of them. But the fact is, your body actually likes it when it doesn't have to constantly be breaking down food. One of the biggest unknown diseases, and I'll call it a disease because I'm battling myself, is insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is nothing more than an overconsumption of food. It's bodies, if you want to say evolution to the processed, constant, sedentary lifestyle that we have. And a lot of people, if they're in a situation where that access to food, I used to tell people on your drive home, I want you to count the amount of places, whether it's a QT, a fast food restaurant, a mom and pop, that you can get access to food anytime. A lot of people, when that access is done, they're going to go through, sugar withdrawal. If you've ever been if you've ever gone keto, or if you've ever gone carnivore and you've lost access to that sugar for a while, those people are not I'm not the nicest person on the planet when you go away from those sugars for a while. And to think about the population, if there's a situation where that just stops, there's going to be so many people that are just going to be hurting because they have not disciplined themselves to that point.
Train yourself to be nice during that sugar withdrawal.
Yeah,
or just live in perpetual sugar minimalism.
Yeah, and
Or just hide away from the world.
There's a conspiracy theory out there that restaurants give you bread prior to your meal, and you gentlemen can debunk my conspiracy theory here. But what they say is that they serve you a lot of bread before your meal. Like you go to Olive Garden, they're gonna push 3, 4, 5, 6 plates of bread before your meal. Why? Bread's gonna break down into sugar. Sugar is gonna make you hungry, and it's gonna make you order more food.
In Texas, we do chips and queso, or chips and salsa, which is essentially the same thing. Yeah.
Same thing. That flour is going to break down, make you more hungry. They're going to keep pushing it. They're going to wait. They can bring that food out right away. They got all that done. They got chefs back there. They got pots of pasta and everything. There's or tortillas. They're not going to bring it out right away. They're doing. They're it's making you hungry. So when you eat, you order a lot. I'm still hungry. 2 tacos weren't enough. One
Yep.
plate of fettuccine alfredo was not enough. I
And
want a
what are you
bottle
gonna
of
do
wine.
with most of the food? You're gonna throw it out because you can't finish it.
Correct.
Yeah.
You order more because you think you're hungry. Your body's saying you're more hungry because the sugars are breaking down. And then again, we're getting to gluttony now, you know?
And then even worse, majority of any of the bread that we make in this country is empty bread.
Oh,
It's
it's
made
awful.
on dead flour and enriched beyond belief. I mean, go look at the side of list of ingredients on most products in a grocery store. It's all poison.
Yeah. Which is something you have to take into account when you're stocking your supplies as well. Like I get it. The big thing when you're stocking supplies is calories, right? That's kind of like the big thing. You want to make sure you have calories to fuel in a situation where there's not, but you also want to try and keep it as healthy as possible. So you want to try and avoid those things that are have more additives and things like that in there that are going to be more empty calories and things that are not going to help you sustain as much longer. So, stocking up freezers with meat, deer meat, whatever the case may be. So you have access to that or whatever the case you have in that regard. But yes, Angel, I'm from the land of Texas Roadhouse. So the little butter buns that come out, man, I have been known to crush a couple of those when they come out. Here's my public confession. I have crushed many of the sweetbreads that come out from Texas Roadhouse.
Only two or two whole rounds of them in one
I'll
sitting.
leave it up to your imagination. I won't. I plead the fifth on that one. I'm not going to go. I only give you so much. I can't bear my entire soul out on here because I don't want you.
But remember, Rick, like, the idea, and this parallels to, and I'm sure Stefano vouch for me on this statement. I want to give you guys back some time, and I know we're coming up on the end of the show here. If we focus on only what the system is giving us, whether it's a grocery store, whether it's a very difficult mindset to wrap our heads around. You see how the Amish are living, which a lot of Catholic land movement, ladies and gentlemen, they take aspects of that in their life, whether it's the organic farming or anything of that, or the bartering. But I'm speaking more of the diet itself. Now that we've gotten into this rabbit trail of, healthy eating or unhealthy eating as well, admitting to our faults, right? But if we look at the parallel of what self-sustainable homesteading is about and what the system is force feeding us, you're going to see that you will live a healthier, fuller life if you can somehow figure out a way to procure your food through those local farmers and your homesteaders. So I challenge you, Rick, go find out where your next farmers market is and go get some anything from there versus your local grocery store, and tell me if it tastes any different. And I'm not judging. I'm not judging, brother. I'm just challenging you because I care about you and I care about your health.
And then further that even further beyond just your local farmers market, find your local Catholic land movement community and start buying from them.
Exactly. That's the goal. We've talked about that. We've talked about the end goal for all of us, whether it's Joey or Angel or myself, is the more involved we can be with Catholics, the better, right? We have to be more involved in lifting each other up. Now, Andrew, you're not speaking anything out of turn because my wife and I, we've had the privilege and the blessing of being able to go to Rome a couple times. And my wife is in heaven when she's in Rome, not just because of the food, but because of how fresh it is and how fresh everything tastes. And then she comes back here and she wants to make food that's inspired by that. And I'll go to the store and get like sun-dried tomatoes, and I come back and half of them are molded or bad. And it's impossible. She's like, how come everything is just so bad here? And when 24 hours, 48 hours ago, we were eating fresh, all kinds of, everything was from shore to door there. So we get it.
I have the answer to that. I have the answer to that. Europeans eat small meals, and a lot of people procure things from local farms there.
Yeah.
In the towns on the outskirts of the European major cities. So between eating non-genetically modified foods and eating smaller meals throughout the day, like Stefano was talking about, more of a fasting mindset versus hey, I'm gonna eat all the McDonald's I can during my day because I can order a 20-piece chicken nugget and a frappe for $5, you know, and I can afford it, you know. I'm not doing that. I know the junk that's in that. But the reality is, yeah, I mean, people in Europe live like that. They live, you know, a lot differently than what is pushed on us as Americans.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then we can kind of wrap up here. The first time I was there, we asked about like fish. Hey, do you guys have fish, like stores, fish stores here in Rome? You know, or if I wanted to go to a restaurant again, and they say we really don't have fish here. But I'm like, but the ocean's right there. He goes, yeah, but it's not. It by the time we bring it up here, it's not fresh enough. So on the ocean, on the coast, they'll eat fish. Here inside, we won't eat it because it's not fresh enough for them. So yeah, that kind of speaks to what you were saying there, Angel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
before we wrap up, I'm going to throw it to Stefano and then Angel. Final thoughts on tonight's topic about the logistics of charity.
I didn't get a chance to bring up some affiliated projects that work with and around Catholic Land Movement, and I wanted to bring those to attention. I put some links in the chat. One of them is pascuaflorida.com, which I'm part of the board of directors of, and affiliated project Vedax Patria that runs out of Pennsylvania, but looking to be the entity to educate and bring people in the methods of getting out to the land and support efforts Catholic Land Movement. And then a partner project that is recent, based out of Florida, with Vedax Patria and with one of the main members of the Pascua Florida project out of Jacksonville, called the Old Urbanism, looking to bring Catholic families into the old Jacksonville urban city center and reclaim properties one by one and bring Catholic community into a dense ecosystem of an urban, like a downtown, but surrounding your church, renovating the church, bringing in Catholic families to be tight knit and together. And I think the main vision with something like Pascua Florida, hopefully we can make a model that allows for popping up more and more of that, connecting agrarian life to the villages like in Europe or in South America, surrounding the Plaza Mayor, the church in the city center or the town center, having homes and homesteads surrounding, and then as the further you go out from that center, you have um, more access to the rural life as needed, and you need to have some tether between the town center or even in the densest city. Try to slowly reclaim our bigger cities little by little. It takes a lot of effort, but in the moments that the house of cards will fall apart, what will be there to take its place if we're not doing anything? We have to do something.
Excellent. Angel, final thoughts, my friend.
You know, I keep it short and sweet 99% of the time. So I can tell you that, you know, homesteaders are preppers. Catholic Land Movement is the epitome of homesteading for Catholics. It's the only organization that we know of that is trying to work towards glorifying God through the land and establish a bartering system between Catholic homesteads. I just think that wherever you're at, try to reach out to your local chapter and learn more and start kind of, prep and support them where you're at, right? Whether you're urban, suburban, rural. I went to the Catholic Land Movement National Conference, and I met people that were living in, anything from suburbia to apartments. So they're trying to support the cause however they can. And I think it starts with the mindset and centering ourselves around community and connecting to those Catholic communities to support that bartering system where we can all support each other when the time comes.
Yeah, I am a complete agreement with everybody here. And I want to thank you guys so much tonight for joining us. Stefano, especially, thank you for taking some time to come out and
My
hang out with
pleasure.
us and help us know a little bit more about the Catholic Land Movement. He is on X. If you guys want to find him, he's part of the retweets with the show tonight as well. If you want to reach out, if you're in the Florida area, reach out to him, see if you can connect there. Angel, as always, it's great to hang out with you as well. Trad, thanks for hanging out with us. And before we go, we want to offer up our prayers to Joey. One of his children is in the hospital. So we are praying for your child, Joey, hopefully a speedy recovery. So you can come back and hang out with us next week. Obviously, we want to make sure that your family is doing a lot better in that regard. And so I want to thank you guys for so much for hanging out with me tonight here on this episode of the Council of St. Michael. The council is adjourned. God bless and Viva Cristo Rey.
Viva.